Fight!
Hey everyone, welcome to Kick Punch. We're going to do another tutorial series on modeling a character, but first I wanted to just encourage you to head over to my channel page and just, subscribe, hit the notification bell, comment on these videos and like, and it helps the algorithm to favor me a little bit and to continue staying motivated to make these videos. So for the last few series, I've made characters that I think my kids would love, and for this series I want to make this guy, and this is Smeagol or Gollum from the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit series. And I just love this character. I think he's a cool character, and this is my own kind of twist, so he's maybe a little bit younger, a little more emo, he's got a little bit more hair, and yeah, so this is the character I'm excited to make, and I'm gonna make this for beginners. So if you don't have any familiarity with Zbrush or modeling, this tutorial is for you. So I'll try to go through the very basics of navigation and how Zbrush works, and then we'll jump into like actually modeling this character. So I'm going to start by opening up Zbrush, and if you would like to model this character exactly, I'm gonna upload a drive link with a link to the image in the description below. So you can just head to the description and click that link and download this image, and we're off to the races. Okay, so this is Zbrush first things, and what it does is it loads up this menu to give you something to start with initially, which is helpful because if you were to just come down here and just start clicking and dragging, you would start dragging out these weird cubes. And we don't want that, so we're going to Control Z, come back to over here to the tool palette and click on Lightbox Tools. And then the character we're actually going to start with is just going to give us kind of a head start. We're going to start with this Nick Z human male. So this character here, we're going to double click him, and then it's going to load him up. I'll click Hide. And for some reason it stays in 2D mode, so if we were to left click and drag, we'll drag this guy out again, but if we were to do it again, it would just drag him out again and again and again. And that's because ZBrush is in 2D mode right now, and we don't want to be in 2D mode. So in order to switch to 3D, on your keyboard hit T. Sorry, drag the character out and then hit T, and then you'll notice that it gives him some perspective. And this way, if you right click around anywhere on your screen, you'll rotate around it, so you're clearly in 3D mode. And in order to pan, you can Alt right click, okay? So it's right click to rotate anywhere on the screen, and then Alt right click to pan. And zoom is a little bit tricky. It's kind of like a pan, so you start the pan, so Alt right click, and then let go of Alt and continue to drag. And then you'll start to zoom in and out. So this is worth some, taking some time, like 30 seconds or so, to just practice the navigation. So right click, Alt right click, Alt right click, let go of Alt, and you will zoom. And the elephant in the room is this guy's got like a dope Donald Trump haircut, which is pretty wild. So we're going to get rid of some of the things and just kind of keep the things that we need. Obviously this guy's way too jacked to be a Smeagol or a Gollum character. So if I come over here to my tool palette, we have all these operations that we can perform on this specific what's called a subtool. So if we click on the subtool, we have the body mesh here, and below that we can see that we have the hair mesh. We can click on that, and now that is the active subtool. We can click on the eyeballs, and that's the active subtool. And a way to really know definitively which subtool you're on is to come down here to click on the solo mode, and you'll see that this reflects that I'm on the eye subtool, and it just kind of hides everything else. Everything else, it's not deleted, it's still there. If I click on this guy, the outer eyeball, skull, teeth, etc. So for this character, we just want the body mesh. So what we're going to do is click on the hairstyle. Excuse me, I've got a little bit of the hiccups going. And we definitely don't want that hairstyle, so we're going to come down to this big delete button and just click delete. Click OK. So that guy's gone. We'll probably keep the eyeballs. We probably don't need the eyeball outers. We're going to delete those guys. We don't need the skull. Let's delete the skull. And then we'll keep the teeth. So now we just have those 3 subtools. And what's really fancy about ZBrush is they have figured out a way to cache all of this memory within this subtool. So if I were to subdivide this character, I could get this character up to 50 million polygons, and I can also get this subtool up to 50 million polygons, and I can also get this one up to 50 million polygons. And so you can allocate all the polygons you need to each individual subtool, and it's super powerful. So anyways, we're going to come back up here to this top subtool, make sure that's the active one, and scroll down in your tool palette and come to geometry. And for now, I think what it has is this thing called dynamic subdivision. So if you hit Shift D on your keyboard, it'll show you what the real polygons look like, okay? And if you hit Shift F, it'll show you the polyframe, the wireframe. So this is a clean geo. This is like a riggable geo, or a geometry that like you would use to animate a character, for example, okay? So if I hit Shift F to turn off our polyframe, this is how many polygons we have. Okay, so it's still pretty low res. The other thing I think we need to deal with here is, actually let's continue on this for a second. So if I wanted to subdivide, let's try sculpting on this character. So if I was to just click on this guy, bulk him up, just get crazy with it, you can see it's pushing out these polygons, kind of nice and fun. Say we want more resolution to work with. If I want more polygons to work with, I can hit Control D, and you can see over here it created a second subdivision level. Okay, so now I have more polygons. I can detail further on this character. And usually, I mean, depending on your computer specs, you can get these characters up to easily between 20 and 50 million polygons if you like. For now, we're going to just make sure Shift D to turn off the dynamic subdivision. I kind of hate dynamic subdivision. We'll come down to layers, okay? And we see that we have layers here, and this says arms down, I guess. So if you drag this slider, we don't care about any of this stuff. So we'll come back to 0 here, mouth open. We don't want mouth open, so turn that off. And I'm just gonna hit bake all. We'll get rid of our layers because that's just gonna hose us later on. Okay, so we're done. This looks like Gollum. It's perfect, right? So let's switch back to our concept. I'm just teasing. We have a long ways to go. So let's try and achieve these proportions with our current geometry. All right, and so the way that we're going to do that is I'm going to Alt-Tab over back to ZBrush. And the way that you can see your concept within ZBrush is you can either come over here to see-through, like so, which is the way that I kind of prefer to do it. Or you could actually come up here to texture, and you go to import, and you can import your image here, and you could use the stencil tool. But I don't really like to teach that very much because I think it's kind of more destructive than it is helpful. So the absolute ideal is that you just have two monitors set up. So you have your concept up on your one monitor, and then you have ZBrush up on your other, which is what I like to do. But for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm trying to keep the character kind of behind the ZBrush shell. And again, you can still navigate, and you can pan, you can zoom, you can do all that stuff. And also, one thing I forgot to mention is say the character's way off over here, and you're like, whoa, what's going on? Instead of having to just manually pan things into place, you can come over here to frame, and it'll just frame up your character right here. Or frame up whatever your subtool is. And I think F on your keyboard does the same thing. Yep, so you can just hit F. Cool. Okay, so let's try and achieve some of the proportions on this character that match more along the lines of our concept. And it's going to be tricky because this guy's so jacked. But one of my favorite tools is the snake hook brush. And so we're going to come over here to our brushes, and we're going to click on the brushes, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of brushes. And you're only going to use a few of these, so don't get too scared. I really like the snake hook tool, and it'll want you to know that for whatever reason a few versions ago it was like it's going to spell activated incorrectly too. But it's going to be like, oh, you should definitely have Sculptors Pro. I hate that. It drives me crazy. Anyway, so right now we have the snake hook brush. Okay, before we had our standard brush, but this is the snake hook. And if you were to click and drag on your character, you can pull and push things around in a real crazy way. And so it's kind of like a move brush. And so what we want to try to achieve is the more slender proportions of our character, and also give him a bigger head. So I'm going to try to bring in his shoulders. And the way I have the brush working on both sides is make sure that you have hit X on your keyboard, and that turns on symmetrical modeling. So if you turn it off, that little dot over there on the left hand side goes away. Turn it on, and it's there. So we want symmetrical modeling on because it just cuts our workload in half. And we're going to start to push and pull his proportions around to try and match our character. So the way that I can scale my brush size up and down as well is you can hit S and it'll bring up this slider for draw size, and you can right click and drag. And again, quickly, I highly recommend using like a Cintiq or a Wacom tablet to do any kind of ZBrush sculpting, because it just feels more natural, and I think honestly you get better results. So let's keep scaling up our draw size or brush size. The other way you can do it manually is you can come up here. This is another way to scale that up. And then up here, this is your actual intensity of your brush. And then you can also use poly paint, which is going to add like color. And for now, I'm going to turn that guy off. I don't need any color on this character. So just using the snake hook brush and adjusting the draw size and scaling or pushing these proportions in. And then one of the really fancy tools in ZBrush is the shift button. So hold shift on your keyboard, and you'll notice over here that your cursor turns blue and it switches over to the smooth brush. So that's kind of your backup brush. And you can actually set whatever backup brush you want, but the smooth brush is obviously probably one of the better options for that. So I'm just smoothing, and don't worry, we're going to get all that detail back later on. But it's definitely shrinking in our character pretty intensely. And you can hold shift and you can come up here and you can drop your intensity down, so your smooth intensity isn't so crazy. This guy's looking perfect right now. I can't. This is my magnum opus, you guys. This is perfection. This is really gonna put me on the map. Okay, so let's. It's awesome. All right. So if we do a see-through, our character's head is huge, so it's gonna be tricky using the snake hook brush to like really scale our character's head up. So one thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use masking and transpose to scale his head up a little bit. And the way you can do that is if you hold Control on your keyboard, you'll notice that your brush is turned to a mask brush. And if I were to hold Control and drag on my character, it adds this dark value, and that's just a mask, right? So now if I was to use the snake hook and try to pull this stuff out, it doesn't work. It only pulls out where it's unmasked. And so I'm going to undo all that shenanigans. And to clear your mask, if you Control, left click, and drag outside of your model, it'll clear your mask. If you undo that and turn up your mask back on, you can actually invert your mask by Control, left clicking, and it'll invert your mask. So you'll be using these techniques quite a bit in ZBrush. So Control, left click, invert, and we're going to clear the mask by Control, left clicking, and dragging. And you can change your mask options too. If you're holding Control, come back over here and click on the mask. You can change it to mask lasso, for example, and that way I can come over here holding Control. I can drag a half circle around the head, and now I've masked his entire head and some of his neck. And if you want to blur this line in your mask, you can Control, left click, and drag, or just Control, left click, and it'll blur that mask a little bit. And I find that sometimes it's good to invert the mask and then Control, left click, and then invert back. And so what we want is the lighter part of the mask to be the head. So Control, left click, so that the light part is the head. And then we're going to come over here to scale. And you'll notice that our transform gizmo is some weird place. So it's way down here. And we need to center this to our working unmasked area. So I'm going to click this guy. And it says go to unmasked mesh center. So click that. And now our pivot point, our control point, is right where we basically want it to be. And another tricky thing is we want to scale all of our subtools. All of our visible subtools, we want those all to scale with us. And in order to do that, you can click this guy on the right hand side right here, and then you'll see it changes to all of these. And that's implying that it's going to transpose and scale all the subtools that are unmasked. So now if I click this yellow square in the center and scale up, we're going to scale his head up significantly. And his neck is too long, so we're going to drop it down a little bit. It looks like his mouth bag is coming through. So I'm going to hit Q to switch back to my brush mode from transpose mode. So if you click on this guy, it'll switch to transpose mode, and then hit Q on your keyboard, it'll switch back to brush mode. And I'm going to drag the mouth bag back in. And there's another cooler brush that we can use to do that later. It's not a huge deal right now, but we're just trying to get the basic proportions of our character. So I just cleared my mask by control left clicking like so. Left clicking and dragging, sorry. Give him a little bit of an Adam's apple. And just continue to refine our proportions a good amount because he's looking pretty weird at the moment. And continue to look over at our concept art. He's got these fun pointy ears and these really pronounced sharp eyebrows. So a lot of sharper kind of details. I'm definitely going for a more stylized approach because the photo real approach has already been done in the movies. So we're kind of giving it our own vibe here. So I'm going to pull out the jawline a little bit. He's got a big old pronounced jaw. Pull out his ears. And if you wanted to, you could mask these ears out. And then blur by left clicking, control left clicking. And then invert your selection by outside of your model, you control left click. And then make sure that you recenter your pivot by clicking this fun guy. And in this case I want to turn off, I only want to affect this one subtool, so I'm going to turn this button off and recenter my pivot, and then you can scale your ears, and you might have to just like grab the red arrow to move this guy back in like so, so we're getting our proportions a little bit closer to our character. Give him some pointy ears. And in the end, we're gonna do this all in Dynamesh, so we're not worried about these stretching polygons at the moment, because we're gonna do a different kind of mesh workflow than a production mesh workflow. We're not worried about this character animating at the moment. We just really want him to look cool and to be ready for a 3D printer. So that's the goal here. Let's check out our concept again. It's getting closer, but his mouth needs to be way bigger. And I'm going to show you a fun brush called, if you come over here to your brushes, and you can also hit B in the viewport to bring up your brushes, move topological. And what that does is if your geo has separate topologies, or like these lips are actually separated, they have a gap between them, you can grab the lower lip and you can see that it only moves that, which is really cool. That's super helpful. I use this brush all the time. So I'm going to grab the upper lip and kind of give him this underbite, this wicked kind of underbite. Drop the top of his head down a little. I think I guess he's pretty forehead heavy. He's got a forehead for days. So one thing you can do is you can kind of try to line up your character, you know, with your concept. This is beneficial. And then just do the see-through. And if you so you can line his eyes up and his nose up a little bit more, some proportions. So okay, nice. Now we're getting there. Looks pretty crazy, but his eyes, let's come back. His eyes are a little bit too close to the center of his head. So I want to switch his eyeballs to move them over. I'm going to click on the subtool over here, and now that's the active subtool. And now my pivot's a little bit off, right? It's a little bit rotated. So click on this lock, and then reset your pivot by clicking this little arrow, and you'll see that it snaps and it freezes the transformations for you Maya people. Relock, And then on the red arrow, if we drag that to the side here, we can get his eyes back into place. Okay, cool. So another sneaky way to switch between subtools, which other than coming over here, all the way over here, is just Alt left click on the subtool you want to be a part of, you want to be married to. And that's like key. That's a key thing, because just overall just cuts your workflow down quite a bit. Alright, so if I hit Shift F, I've still got this mouth bag kind of hanging out, right? And you'll notice you can see all these different colors in my subtool. And what that is they're just temporary selectable chunks of your model. They're called polygroups. And if I hold Control plus Shift and then left click on one of the verts of that mouth bag, it'll hide everything else except for that polygroup, right? So to bring everything back outside of the model, Control Shift left click, it'll bring everything back. So for now, I just want to make this guy visible, and then I'm going to move him out of the way because he's just in the way. And then hold Control Shift left click, and now our mouth bag is out of the way. And polygroups are super powerful too. I recommend getting familiar with those, and we'll probably use those during this workflow a little bit, just because you have these really cool ways to be able to isolate different chunks of your model to work on without other things getting in the way. So it's good to get familiar with that. So I'm just going to continue to refine our proportions a little bit. In our character, his biceps are really kind of small but toned, and he's got these big old beefy forearms. I'm going kind of more of like a ape or kind of a gorilla proportional type thing. I think I was using that as reference. We got these fun noodle arms. Let's bring some elbows. Let's make his forearms skinnier like our concept. I'm using a mouse right now. Ugh. Sometimes I catch myself doing that, just using the mouse when I have a perfectly good Cintiq here. It's super sad. All right, so another cool brush to look into is if you come over here to your brushes, look for the inflate. And if you don't know, if you know what the name of the brush is you want to use, you can hit I on your keyboard for inflate, and it'll isolate all the I brushes. So it kind of gets everything out of the way. And then you can just hit N, and then you'll end up with the inflate brush. So the way I did that again was if you hit I, it'll isolate those, and look at the little orange letter on the top left corner, and then it'll isolate that brush. So for inflate, we want to inflate his forearms out. Okay. Inflate his fingers out a little bit. His fingers are way too skinny. And again, holding Shift to kind of smooth things back. And that's a very common workflow in Zbrush, is push the proportions till things look crazy and then just smooth it back. It's one of the benefits of just doing a digital workflow as opposed to a traditional sculpture workflow, is you can have symmetrical modeling and undos, and you can easily just push the detail too far and then just scale it right back just with a click of a button. Not to knock the modelers, but one thing that I'm doing too for my brushes, right, is I have my brushes set to hotkeys. I have them set through 1 through 0 on my keyboard, and the way that you can do that is if you come up here to the top left corner to brush and click this little weird icon on the top left corner, it'll snap it over here to the menu, so it'll just kind of freeze it open so that you can see everything. And as you're going through and clicking on these different brushes, I'm just going to click on some random ones here. We got the snake hook we've already added. We'll do the regular move brush, trim dynamic. So these brushes start to kind of populate over here in this menu. And if you want to add these to a shortcut, what you do is you hold Control Alt, and then you'll see there's a little white notification in white text up there that says press any key combination. So in this case, you would hit, okay, I want the standard brush to be my number 1 key. Hold Control Alt left click, and then hit 1 on your keyboard. And now when you hit 1 on the keyboard, that'll be your brush. So I have clay buildup, standard, snake hook, inflate, move topological, trim dynamic. These are some of my big hitters, and I have those as 1 through 9 on my keyboard. So just so you know, that's how I'm kind of more easily switching through my brushes. So I'm going to close that by clicking that icon up there, and then click these little arrows to give me more screen space. And so I'm going to switch 3 on my keyboard as my snake hook brush. So you might want to pause the video and go through and set all of your hotkeys, because that's going to help speed up your workflow and make everything smooth sailing. Okay, and another one that one of my favorite key brush that I love is called, if you go over to brushes, hitting B, the Damien standard, so D, and then it's called Dam standard. It's made by Damien Canderley, and it's one of the best brushes. So I click on this guy. I think I have that set to 2 on my keyboard, and what it does is I'm going to turn Shift F off, the polyframe off, holding, and then just left click and drag, and it kind of carves into the detail really nicely. It's really good for adding, like tonality to the muscles and all that fun stuff. So we'll give him some, a little bit of a chest back. Again, we're gonna look at the concept and see what kind of tone we have. So he's pretty toned. He's got these interesting rib cage. Switching to the standard brush. So it's a lot of it is the standard brush and Damien standard, inflate. Clay buildup is also a great brush. You can see I have that as the active brush right there. And I'm gonna hit. Let's see. If you come over here to your subtool palette into geometry, I'm gonna hit Control D and subdivide this character once, so we have more polygons to work with. I think we've reached that point. And I'm going to start pulling out my rib cage just a little. And his pelvis just looks terrible. So I'm going to use the Damien standard to kind of carve in his some more pelvic details and smooth those back. I'm not going to get too anatomical about this if you catch my drift. I'm going to keep this a G-rated adventure. So give him some. I mean, look, back in his younger days, he probably had some abs, right? So I like in my concept though how his ribs are pretty prominent. I like that. Okay, so I'm gonna bring these. I think these are his lats. Look, I don't know the names of all the muscles. I should probably work harder at knowing that stuff, but okay, so yeah, these two like tendons here in his throat. He's gonna have like a little bit of some collarbones. Okay, and another cool brush is the inflate brush. Inflate his bottom lip a little bit more, and his cheeks. Move those guys out a smidge. So I'm smoothing a lot. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit too into the weeds right now. Right now we're focusing on large details and getting just the larger proportions kind of in line for this video. His glutamus maximus is a little too glutamusy. I'm going to smooth that in. Crease in the elbow. So bigger forearms. I'm going to crease his armpits. I'm using the Damien standard and I have my draw size scaled up a good amount for that. Let me add some tone to his shoulders. And again, if you need to pause and just kind of focus on this detailing, like I've done this countless times in the industry, so I'm definitely speeding it up the process. I'm trying to keep these videos reasonably short and bite-sized so people doesn't get too daunting. So I'm going to adjust this contact point between the neck and the skull too, and trying to make that a little less tapered. And still, in reality, I mean, our head is still pretty freaking small in comparison to the concept. So let's scale that up significantly. Let's do our mask again. So Control, left click, drag, lasso. And if you'd like to, without having to left click and Control left click to blur your mask, you can come over here to masking in the tool palette and go to blur mask and just click that a bunch of times. And now I'm going to invert the selection, control left click, and then I'm going to turn on all my subtools because we want my teeth and my eyes to scale. And I want my pivot adjusted just a little bit, so I'm going to unlock my pivot, move it down into place where I want it to scale from, and then relock it, and then click this yellow square and drag that up. Alright, so let's do a see-through, getting closer, still even bigger I would say. Probably something like that. Okay, so I cleared my mask, control left click drag, switching back to the snake hook brush, and smoothing and pulling his jaw down because he needs to have a jaw. It's probably the biggest difference right now is the size of his jaw, I think. One thing I'm going to do too is I just don't like the pose of his legs, so I'm gonna hit Shift D to go down subdivision levels to our lower res poly mesh, and I'm going to hit rotate. I'm going to click on rotate, and then I'm going to control left click and drag down his pelvis, down his legs, and you'll see that it kind of like masks along the topology there. And this is super powerful for when you're posing a character. Our pivot is off, so we're going to unlock this, kind of put it more in place where we want, go to the profile, and the way I'm snapping to these different views, by the way, is as you're right clicking and rotating, hold shift and it'll snap and hold it into the nearest orthographic perspective. Okay, and that brings up another comment too. Right now we're in 3D perspective but orthographic view, meaning our character is very flattened out. And that's so we can really nail our symmetrical modeling down and make that more easy for us. But if we wanted to see this in perspective, all you have to do is hit P on your keyboard, and you'll notice that it adds some like a lens distortion, like some perspective on your actual. It becomes an actual perspective camera. So you'll see that like the foot shows up now on the other side, but if I hit P, it switches back to orthographic view. So that's some little navigation basics. So switching back to rotate, turning off all subtools, I just want this one to rotate. I'm going to grab the outer white circle now that I have this in place. Oops, I forgot to lock my tool. And I'm going to rotate those in ever so slightly. And I just like that look better. It looks more natural. He's a little hippie. So we're going to bring the hips in still. Let's look at our character again. He gets real skinny in his pelvis area. Like I said, he's a stylized dude. So I'm gonna make his thighs and stuff a little bit skinnier, and his calves are gonna pop a little bit bigger. Okay, so he's still looking pretty crazy, but he's getting closer to the proportions that we want. That weird bump there. Weird bulge on his neck. Let's fix that guy. Okay. So take a good amount of time on this. Pause the video and just practice and get better at your anatomy and your proportions. Do some, grab some reference. I really like Pure Ref. It's like a free software that you can load up and just add all your reference to that. Even though we are doing a stylized character, we want our anatomy to be on point. So we're going to take a good amount of time on that. The character's going to, he's going to get better as we go. So I'm going back up a subdivision level. Even bigger with that mouth, I feel like. Square out this chin. So using Damien's standard to carve in the details. I scoot his knees up a little bit. So I've got my snake hook brush here. I've scaled up the draw size quite a bit. I'm going to push his knees up a good amount. Here we go. And I'm going to pop out his ankles. Those a little more bony. And bring those calves out a little bit more. Using the Damien standard. His traps are crawling up his neck a little bit too high. I don't want this guy to be like super jacked. And we could use the standard brush to pop out some of these little spinal areas like we have in the concept. Okay. And I've had symmetrical modeling on the entire time. Just so you know, make sure that that's the case. Sometimes it's easy to hit X and get out of that, and then there are ways to get around that if you have accidentally turned off your symmetry. Switching back to Damien standard because we're doing some definition here in the muscles and things. Okay, cool. I'm gonna hit save now. Still. So you can see my file structure too, how I like to save things. I like to make a ZBrush folder, 1_Z. This is my ZBrush folder, and then I change this from NICZ human male average to Smeagol. I don't know if that's how you smell that. I don't know if that's how you smell Smeagol. I think I just had a stroke. Smeagol version 1. Okay. Always version your files. It's good practice. So bringing back some of that rib definition. And the ribs are kind of an interesting thing to get right. They kind of like offset each other. And again, I don't claim to be like a pro in anatomy, as you can clearly see. I'm just like kind of faking it till I make it. But the more you do this, it's just like anything, the better you'll get. And I think that my torso might be a little, well, maybe not. I want it to have a little bit more girth in this. There's also like this V pattern right here that kind of comes up and connects with your shoulder muscles right in front of your traps. So I'm going to try to get that guy. And again, I am getting a little bit too into the weeds. This video is getting a little long, but that's the fun part about ZBrush and sculpting, is that you just get kind of lost in it, which is awesome. So some of these muscles, bringing those in, defining his shoulders. Okay. And we're going to try to keep this guy in a clean topology as long as we can, because that's going to help us when we get to the pose stage. When we start to pose him, we want to be able to drag out our masks and things in an easy way for when we start to transpose him. So we'll stay in a clean topology as opposed to some of the other uglier Dynamesh kind of looking stuff. But we'll eventually get there. Okay. I want his arms to be bigger. Like I said, I want him to be, or longer. I want him to be kind of like a monkey in his proportions. So I'm going to finish this up. And then I'm going to mask his arms, just like we masked his head. So holding control, and then with the mask lasso activated, I'm actually going to go down to subdivision level by hitting Shift D. And then I'm going to drag a lasso around his shoulders and all the way around his hands, and blur that mask by control left clicking, and then invert the mask by control left clicking outside of the model. And then I'm going to turn on scale, unlock, move my pivot, relock, and then I'm going to scale his arm, or rotate his arms, and then I'm going to scale them out a little bit. Okay, moving that back in, and a little too much of a bow here. It's kind of unnatural, so I'm going to bring that bow in like that. And cool, I think I like that proportion. I'm going to clear my mask by control left clicking and dragging, and I'm going to rotate his hands out. I'm going to do the same thing. Control left clicking to blur the mask, invert the mask. Move my pivot by unlocking, relock, grab that white circle. And I want his hands to be bigger too, so I'm going to scale that. You'll notice it kind of scales it out this way. This is something Zbrush has always done. I don't know why, it's really annoying. I wish it just scaled directly from this pivot, but it scales from the center. All you have to do is just scale out and then re-bring them back in with these white arrows. And there might be a fix for this that I'm just not aware of. He's got this weird kind of S shape in his hands, so we're going to use a scaled up snake hook to kind of move his hands more into better proportions. Clear my mask. I apologize if I'm moving too quickly. Let me know how my cadence is, if I need to slow things down a little bit for you. This is intended to be an intro to ZBrush tutorial, so I could probably slow things up just a little bit. Yeah, be sure to comment, let me know how I'm doing, because these all these interactions help me to stay motivated to make these videos. So I'm continuing to refine the wrist area, the proportions of the hand. We're getting this guy to be definitely more stylized. Hitting D to go up my subdivisions. His feet are pretty small, but instead of doing the whole mask transpose thing with his feet, I think I'm just going to use snake hook. Again, I snap to the bottom view by holding shift while I'm rotating. Right click shift and it'll snap. And I'm going to grab his feet and kind of push those out a little bit and widen those. Okay, if he has like stubbier toes. I'm going to come over here to inflate and inflate those toes back out. So bring that toe up. Cool, his feet should be a little bit bigger. Make them wider too. Oops, there we go. Nice. Okay, cool. Give him kind of more of a bad posture. Right now he's still a little bit athletic, and make him a little more hunchy, kind of Gollum-y. Yeah, bring his back out. What I'm trying to get is this S formation, this S shape in his profile. Okay, so I'm going to save this. I think this is a good starting point for the first video. In the next video, we're going to continue to refine the detailing, and then we'll start to get him posed as well, and get him properly posed, maybe even start to build out his base a little bit. Just very basic. We're still very, very early on, so it has a long ways to go, but we'll get there together. So please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Get involved. Let me know how I'm doing. At the end of this tutorial, we'll have an awesome 3D printable Gollum figure, and we will see you all in the next video.